Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in today. This is the Bodega Cat Book Club Spiritual Edition. And today we're continuing our reading of the Gospel of number 17. Now, the title of the book is on the screen, as you can see, but I'm not going to say it out loud because I might get in trouble with YouTube. But if you take simple gematria, which is numerology, where A equals 1, B equals 2, C equals 3, so on and so forth until Z or Z, which equals 26. Each English alphabet corresponds to a number, specific number. So the title of this book, it corresponds to number 17 in the alphabet. So you guys are very smart, and I'm sure you'll figure it out if you guys are just listening. So that's the title of this book. In the book, as I read the chapter, I'll just use the numerical number instead of the actual alphabet. Okay, so sorry about the glare. The subtitle is called The Earliest Gospel: An Introduction to the Original Stories and Sayings of Jesus. And it's by John S. Kloppenborg. So before we begin, this particular book was inspired by spirit, if you want to, I guess you can call it that. There is a little backstory to this. I won't get into it here, but I did kind of get into it a little bit more in depth in my introduction video, which I will leave a link in the description box below. Um, I guess you could say it's an inspired reading. I don't know. But this particular, yeah, I don't know why Spirit wants me to read it, but we're reading it. So there you go. Okay. So for those who are more devotional Christian fundamentalists, which is a family background that I came from, I just wanted to say that, real quick, that God is meant to be experienced and transformative and experiential. And I don't think God is meant to be philosophized or categorized or, put in a little box, things of that nature. So I just want to encourage you to keep that in mind as we read this book. But before we start, I want to thank you all for being here. If you do enjoy these book clubs, please consider checking out our other book clubs. On Wednesdays, we have our health book clubs where we read books about health, and then Thursdays we read about financial books. So our financial book clubs on Thursdays. So we put all the book clubs, every episode on YouTube, so you could check out our past books that we've read as well as our current ones, and we have them all on a playlist. So you guys can just, listen to it. I don't think you even have to download. But anyways, and we have other contents on there as well. So please do check it out. Check out our YouTube channel, like and subscribe and comment and all that good stuff. I think they're doing having new features on YouTube, and I don't know how that works. I think it's called hype the video or whatever. They're always coming up with new gimmicks. But anyways, you do what you are familiar with or comfortable with. That's okay with me. All right, so we also have a free monthly newsletter that we put out. So please do consider subscribing to that as well. And if you want to support us further, you can buy me a coffee, leave a donation. There are also support us through our merch. We have many different designs for your fur babies, for your kitties and doggies, as well as for humans. And we're always updating our our old designs and uh, coming up with new designs. So come back often, check it out. It's on our shop tab on our website. And if you are in the Los Angeles area or visiting LA, please do come visit us in our healing center. We have a healing center that we use technologies based on Nikola Tesla's scalar wave research for holistic healing for both domestic cats and dogs, and humans. So you can read all about that technology, as well as our other services on our website. But whatever way, shape, or form that you guys support us, we appreciate it very much. But most importantly, thank you for being on this reading journey with us. I think that reading is a lost art, and I'm, hopefully I can bring it back just a little bit and share it with people who like to read. And uh, I- it is. I know. I don't know if it's scientifically proven, but reading does make you smarter because it rewires your neural brain system. So if you look at wealthy people, rich people, they are avid readers. They read all the time. So, anyways, all right, let's dig into it. So this is chapter 2, and this will be part 2. Uh, and like I said, I will substitute the alphabet with the numerical number. And let me just move the camera in a little bit. That way you guys can see so that I can see. Okay. All right, let's get to it. Expanding minimal 17. A frequent question is whether Matthew and Luke might have omitted some of 17. In that case, of course, some of 17 would be forever lost unless we were to discover some other document that preserves 17 or a copy of 17 itself. Since both Matthew and Luke omitted a few Markan pericope entirely, such as Mark chapter 3, verse 20 to 21, chapter 4, verse 26 to 29, 8:22 to 26, and 14:51 and 52, and some parts of the Markan pericope, it is possible that both also omitted some of 17. Eric Eve has proposed a thought experiment in which he tried to reconstruct Mark from Matthew and Luke, supposing that we have the text of 17, not Mark. And there is an endnote for that. Here, I will just mention that there is an endnote, but we won't actually read it at the end of, which is contained at the end of the book. I'll just, if you wish to do a deeper dive, or going down that little rabbit hole, you are welcome to do that if you have a book. So, but here we're just going to mention it. Okay, continuing. Eve found that this reconstructed mark had very little that it should not contain, and that Mark's sequence of pericope could be reconstructed correctly. It would, however, be shorter than our mark, due mainly to the Mark 17 overlaps, which tend to favor 17's wording and obscure marks, and to Luke's great omission of Mark chapter 6, verse 45 to chapter 8, verse 22. While it is possible that Matthew and Luke jointly omitted some of 17, there is reason to think that they did not omit much. Together, Matthew and Luke preserve all but 31 of Mark's 666 verses. Interesting number. And there is an endnote about that. And Matthew has all but 55, which is 92%, of Mark's verses. This suggests that together, Matthew and Luke were quite conservative with their sources. However, moreover, a close comparison of Matthew and Luke indicates that they tend to preserve the wording of 17 better on average than the wording of Mark. And there's an endnote about that. This is not simply because 17 is predominantly sayings of Jesus, which we should expect to be preserved more faithfully. In fact, Matthew and Luke also preserve the narrative bits of 17 better than they preserve the narrative portions of Mark. Of course, we cannot be sure that some of 17 was not omitted, but the general tendencies of Matthew and Luke suggest that they preserved a very large portion or large proportion of the document. Special material. A more complicated question concerns the possibility that either Matthew or Luke omitted a unit from 17 and other evangelists preserved it. Both evangelists, after all, omitted parts of Mark. Matthew does not have Mark 1:23 to 28, 1:35 to 38, 11:18 to 19, and 12:41 to 44, while Luke omitted Mark 4:33 to 34 and all of Mark 6:45 to 8:26. Oh, chapter 6, verse 45, all the way through chapter 8, verse 26. I think that's what they meant. If, oh, okay. If they did the same with 17, this would mean that some of the material that appears only in Matthew and only in Luke, in fact, came from 17. This material, called special material, includes such sayings as Luke's woes, chapter 6, verse 24 to 26, which are the mirror image of 17's beatitudes, or Matthew's chapter 5, verse 41 on going an extra mile, which is found in the midst of other sayings from 17, or Luke's parable of the lost drachma, found attached to the 17 parable of the lost sheep. Scholars differ in their approaches to special material. On one end of the spectrum, a few include a good deal of special material, supposing that both Matthew and Luke omitted a good bit of 17. Others are minimalists, either assuming that Matthew and Luke did not omit much of 17, or holding that a reconstruction of 17 should not include any material that is at all doubtful. I believe that a middle course should be steered, and that we can include a modest amount of special material, but only when stringent criteria are met. Sayings that appear in only Matthew or only Luke could be included in 17. 1. When the saying in question is a component of texts already assigned to 17. 2. When it accords stylistically with other 17 texts. And 3. Where there is no reason to suspect that Matthew or Luke has created the saying. And 4. And when good reasons can be adduced but why the other evangelists omitted it. And there is an endnote about that. Application of these principles results in only a slight expansion of 17. The International 17 Project reconstruction includes only Matthew chapter 5, verse 41 on going an extra mile, Luke 11, verse 27 to 28, a woman flattering Jesus in the ground, Luke 15, verse 8 to 10, the lost drachma, Luke 17, 20 to 21, the kingdom of God is within you, and Luke 17, 28 to 29, the days of Lot. And there is an endnote about that. I have argued for a few more sayings. 17 or Matthew, chapter 11, 23b to 24. Matthew's longer woe against Capernaum. And Luke chapter 6, verse 24 to 26, Luke's woes, 9, verse 20, chapter 9, verse 61 to 62, on putting one's hand to the plow, and 12, verse 13 to 14, and 16 to 21, on inheritance and wealth. And there's an endnote about that. Let me illustrate the kind of arguments that go into including a piece of special material in 17. The parable of the lost drachma occurs only in Luke, chapter 15, verse 8 to 10, but should be assigned to 17. First, in Luke, this parable forms a pair with the 17 parable of the lost sheep. Luke chapter 15, verse 4 to 7, and Matthew 18, verse 12 to 14. Thus, it is found in a 17 context. Second, from a stylistic point of view, it strongly resembles both the parable of the lost sheep and other 17 texts. Both the lost sheep and the lost drachma take the form, quote, what man or woman among you having X, or if he or she loses it, will not seek until he or she finds it, and rejoicing, ... end quote. The opening formula is also found in other 17 parables, such as 17:11:11, what father among you, ... and 17, chapter 12, verse 25, who among you, ... Moreover, the double parable of a man with sheep and a woman with the drachmas is an example of a phenomenon of gender pairing found elsewhere in 17. Double illustrations featuring a man's activity and a woman's appear frequently in 17. 17 chapter 11, verse 31 to 32, the queen of the south and Jonah. Chapter 12, verse 24 to 28, those who farm, those who spin. Chapter 13, verse 18 to 21, a man sowing and a woman making bread. And chapter 17, verse 34 to 35, two men in a field, two women at a grindstone. Third, although a few scholars think that Luke inserted the parable of the lost drachma from some other source, this suggestion is highly unlikely. It is highly unlikely that 17 and some completely independent source would contain two parables that were almost identical in form. The only variable alternatives are that the parable is from 17 or that it is a Lucan creation modeled on 17, chapter 15, verse 4 to 7. But no one has been able to suggest a reason for Luke creating the second parable. Luke has three parables in chapter 15, the lost sheep, the lost drachma, and the lost son, each featuring a celebration and the proclamation that, quote, what was lost has been found, end quote. Chapter 15, verse 6, 9, 24, and 32. These motifs constitute an editorial refrain that answers the Pharisees' complaints about Jesus dining with sinners. Luke chapter 15, verse 1 to 3. The most dramatic of these parables is the third, featuring a human who sins and returns. The least effective is the lost drachma, an inanimate object which can neither spin nor repent. Thus, it is unlikely that Luke composed the lost drachma, since it does not effectively illustrate his theme. But in view of 17's penchant for paired male-female illustrations, the case is strong for derivation from 17. Stronger, in fact, for without Luke's emphasis on repentance and his apologetic for Jesus's dining habits, the economics of the two parables comes into sharper focus. It is a poor shepherd who has a small flock of 100 sheep and must care for them himself. It is a poor woman who has a life savings of only 10 drachmas, less than 1 month's wage. Both are quite unlike a man in the next parable with his servants, robes, shoes, rings, and fatted calves. In other words, the first two parables cohere with the village or small town environment, otherwise thought to reflect the situation of 17. Finally, we must ask why Matthew would omit the parable of the lost drachma. The reason is plain. Matthew used the parable of the lost sheep, something that could wander off and return, as part of his extended exhortation in chapter 18 to seek those who had sinned. The parable of the lost drachma would simply not fit. It is an inanimate object that could not wander off. The evidence favors Luke chapter 15, verse 8 to 10, being derived from 17. The parable is found in a 17 context, and it is stylistically consistent with 17. Indeed, it displays 17's characteristic use of gender-paired illustrations. It is unlikely that Luke created the illustration, since his main point comes not in the parable of the lost drachma, but in the parable of the prodigal son. On the other hand, Matthew cannot have preserved the parable in the context in which he used the lost sheep. These arguments taken to that, oh my goodness, I'm having cotton mouth. These arguments taken together constitute a good case for the inclusion of Luke chapter 15, verse 8 to 10 in 17. Some problematic passages. As I have argued above, Pericope called Mark 17 overlaps, where Matthew and Luke agree in having a substantially different version than that preserved by Mark, can be assigned to 17. But what is a substantial disagreement with Mark? The account of Jesus' baptism illustrates the problem. It is found in all three Gospels. Ordinarily, then, we would suppose that Matthew and Luke took their account from Mark. There are, however, a few respects in which Matthew and Luke agree against Mark, agreements that may signal the presence of a 17 version of the baptism. And there is an endnote for that. Some scholars have added that 17 in fact requires an account in which Jesus was acclaimed as Son of God if the devil's challenge in 17 chapter 4 verse 1 to 13, if you are the Son of God, is to make sense. But these arguments have failed to persuade others who point out that each of the minor agreements between Matthew and Luke is entirely explicable on the basis of Matthean and Lucan editorial habits. Thus, the agreements of Matthew and Luke are simply coincidental. Moreover, the argument that 17 requires a narrative which identified Jesus as the Son of God is flawed. None of the Gospels offer accounts that explain the titles Son of Man, Christ, or Son, S-O-N, and yet they use these titles without hesitation. Since synoptic experts are nearly evenly divided on whether to include the baptism of Jesus in 17, I think it best to exclude it. There's an endnote about that. Matthew chapter 3, verse 2 to 6, and Luke chapter 3, verse 2 to 4 offer another complex case. Again, oh, excuse me, I'm going to sneeze here in a minute. Mm. Okay, sorry about that. Bless me. All right, where am I? Let's read that. Let's read that paragraph again. My sneeze got me distracted. Okay, Matthew chapter 3, verse 2 to 6, and Luke chapter 3, verse 2 to 4 offer another complex case. Again, there is a Markan parallel, chapter 1, verse 2 to 6, and Matthew and Luke display a relatively high degree of verbal agreement with Mark. Most of the agreements between Matthew and Luke, such as John preaching in the wilderness and the quotation of Isaiah, chapter 14, verse 3, are based on Mark. Nevertheless, Matthew and Luke concur against Mark in the use of a rather unusual phrase, locating the story in, quote, all the circuit of the Jordan. Oh dear, what is that? Is that Greek? Pasa he perikoros tau Yorandao. Oh, I'm so sorry I butchered that. Okay, anyways. This agreement might be taken as coincidental or trivial, were it not for the fact that in the Hebrew Bible, this phrase has a technical meaning, referring to the southern Jordan Rift Valley. The phrase appears almost exclusively in connection with the story of Lot and the destruction of Sodom. Genesis chapter 13, verse 10 to 12, chapter 19, verse 17, 25, and 28. It seems unlikely that Matthew and Luke could have coincidentally added the phrase, for neither uses the phrase in its technical sense. Matthew confuses the area with the, quote, wilderness of Judea, end quote, Matthew chapter 3, verse 1, which does not include the Rift Valley. And Luke displays no specific knowledge of Judean geography at all. Moreover, the Lot story with which the phrase is associated does not play a special role in Matthew's or Luke's interpretation of John's ministry for both. under Mark's influence, immediately associate John with the motif of restoration and repentance taken from Isaiah 40 and not Genesis 19. An, an allusion to the Lot story, however, coheres extremely well with what follows in 17. John's preaching refers to, quote, fleeing from the wrath to come, end quote, appeals to a kinship with Abraham. Lot was Abraham's nephew, and to destructive fire and the transformation of, quote, stones into kin of Abraham, end quote, contrasts the fate of Lot's wife. 17, moreover, has several other references and allusions to the Lot story. 17, chapter 10, verse 12, 17 slash Matthew, chapter 11, verse 23b to 24, 17, chapter 17, verse 28 to 29, and verse 34 to 35. Allusions that neither Matthew nor Luke developed. And there is an endnote about that. Of course, 17 cannot have simply begun, quote, you brood of vipers, end quote. Some introduction is necessary, and John must have been explicitly named. This means that at the very least that John must have been named as the first speaker in 17, and given the vituperative, vituperative, what the heck is that word? I gotta look it up afterwards. It's got to do with the tone of voice, it looks like. Vituperative. I don't know how to pronounce that, but anyway, I guess it's a type of tone of voice, tone of the speech. Vituperative, tone of the speech. There must have been some indication of audience and setting. Relocation of the Lot story would fit this role admirably. For these reasons, the International 17 Project has included portions of Luke chapter 3, verse 2b to 3, and 17, albeit in a highly lacunal form. Quote, John, quote, ... all the circuit of the Jordan, ... end quote. On the basis of the foregoing, we can propose tentatively a reconstruction of 17. I place in double brackets, and he has a little picture here to represent that for those who are watching or who are looking at the screen. I place in double brackets sayings where there is considerable uncertainty, and in angle brackets, there's a picture about that, pericope that are not included in the International 17 Project reconstruction, but which this writer believes may also come from 17. Brace back brackets, there is a picture of that, and smaller font are used for pericope, sometimes proposed for 17 membership, but which I do not think qualify. As always, 17 texts are cited by their Lucan versification. Okay, so here we have a bunch of chapters and verses that the author listed, but did not list the corresponding verse, how do you call it? He lists the chapter and verse in numerical form, but not the actual verse, in English or whatever. I hope I'm making sense. So I'm not going to read this whole paragraph because I really don't know how to read it. But what I will do is I will pause. If you want to take a screenshot for those of you who are more left-brained or who likes to analyze, good for you. That's not my cup of tea. But anyways, if you guys want to do a compare and contrast and do a little deeper dive into it, you can do that. So there is a group of chapter and verse in this page, and there is some more on the next page. So I will just pause, or you could pause if you want to do a screenshot or whatever it is that you want to do. But I'm not going to read it. Okay, so Okay, so that's the part of the paragraph. And this is the other part. And he's got both, double brackets and bold and bold numbers and all kinds of stuff there. And angle brackets and brace brackets and all that kind of stuff. So you guys can just study it on your own. Okay. All right, so continuing. This does not represent a major expansion beyond minimal 17. The inclusion of a few pieces of special material justified by rigorous argument would amount to a modest expansion of 17 from 235 to 266 verses, only 31 additional verses. See the appendix for an English text of 17, which represents this modest expansion of 17. All right, we will end here for now. I hope you enjoyed that. In my opinion, this is a little too analytical for my taste, but people, whatever. Some people like it that way. I'm more of an experiential kind of person. Like I said in the beginning of the video, I think God is meant to be, or the divine or creator is meant to be experienced. It's meant to be transformative. It's meant to be life-changing. I don't think that our little puny little brain can fathom the secrets of the universe. That's just my opinion, right? Anyways, let me know what you think. What do you think of the analysis? What do you think of the book overall? What do you think, you know, of this section? I'd love to hear from you and see what you think about the whole thing. And in the meantime, I hope you guys all have a great day, and we'll see you next time in our next book club. Okay, bye now.